4, 3, 2. All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another Chat and Learn here with Power to Fly. My name is Mariella Marie, and as always, super excited to roll into this next hour with you all. Our guest speaker is going to drop a lot of knowledge. She's been here before. It's always a pleasure to host her and just to give her the platform and the space to just, dive in deep and share her tips and tricks. But before I present her, I just want to go over some quick housekeeping rules so that we all feel comfortable and confident in this next hour. I like to start off by reminding us, not that we need a reminder, but crazy things going on in the world. You could be doing anything else, but you're deciding to be intentional and spend this hour with us if you're live with us, or if you're rewatching, you're deciding to, share knowledge with us. So I appreciate your presence. With that said, if you are here on the live call, we would love for you to participate. And you can do that by turning your cameras on if you feel called to do so. We believe in visibility here at Power to Fly. So, no stress, no pressure at all. But if you feel called to do so, you are invited to turn your cameras on. You're also invited to add your pronouns to your names or, anything else behind your name that you would like to highlight. I like to invite our guests to do that so that our speakers can just kind of browse around and see, okay, your career pivoting, or, you're going to be working remote soon, anything you want, feel free to add that to your name so that we can get to know you even if you don't have your camera on. If you do hop off mute, we are recording this live, so you will be featured in our live recording. And I invite you to hop off mute whenever you want to share your voice. Again, you're being intentional by taking the time to share this virtual space with us. So whenever you have a reflection or your own tips and tricks, hop off of mute. We want to hear from you. If you have any sensitive information and you prefer to be kept anonymous, just find me in the chat box under Mariella Marie, write to me privately, and I will flag your reflection or your question to our guest speaker and keep you anonymous. The last thing that I'll say is we'd love for you to follow us on socials and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can keep up with all the great chats we've got in store. And for those of you who don't know me, if this is your first chat that you're joining where I've moderated, hello and welcome. I love to pick the beautiful minds of our guest speakers that talk about a bunch of ways that we can bring our authentic selves to the table, how we can encourage each other, to work in the career space that is going to amplify our voice, make space at the table, all that jazz. You know the drill. I love to bring our conversations to emotional intelligence and the awareness of how we can deepen our emotional intelligence at work and at home. So I might bring some of my reflections to that point. Feel free to philosophize with me if you're interested. And I invite you all to support the project that I'm currently working on that is called the Positive Force Team. You can go to thepositiveforceteam.org, sign up for our newsletter that's coming out soon, our first newsletter. So yes, this is exciting. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to our guest speaker. Lorraine, let us know a little bit about yourself for those of you who have not gotten to listen to a conversation where she has been on Power to Fly before. Please, start up from the beginning. I know we have a long history between you and I, but let folks know for those who are just joining. Let us know a little bit about you, how you came to learn about Power to Fly, and what you're excited to share today.
Sure, definitely. And I'm so happy to be back. And thank you everyone for joining today. So I am the editorial director at Prezi. I'm also a virtual keynote speaker, and I was an editor at LinkedIn before that. And, I was being the first editorial hire at Prezi. I've been so lucky to have the chance to build and lead a very small but mighty team, a hybrid team at that. And, managing is something that I've always been super passionate about. So I'll be sharing some of my tips here, but I definitely want to hear from all of you and to hear your tips as well. I'm all about learning and sharing insights and advice. So definitely want to keep this a two-way conversation. In terms of how I found out about Power to Fly, I can't exactly remember, but I do remember receiving an email from Power to Fly. And normally I would unsubscribe to these kinds of emails where I'm like, I'm not sure where this came from, but the content was really good and I just decided to stay on. And since then, I'm so happy I did, because I've been able to work with Power to Fly in a number of different ways and to meet amazing people like Mariella. So thank you all for joining today again and supporting Power to Fly.
Awesome. So I know you've got a beautiful presentation ready to share with us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you have the right to share your screen. And folks, as Lorraine is setting up her presentation, I just want to say thank you all for submitting these awesome questions previous to the chat. We're going to walk through these questions one by one. If you see your question come up on the screen, let us know you're here. If you don't see your question come up on the screen because you didn't get a chance to submit one, you still have time to drop questions in the chat box or to hop off mute. So I'm going to sound like a broken record throughout the hour because I want to hear from you. So without further ado, please take it away, Lorraine.
Thank you. And so just a quick housekeeping thing, if you can all put me on full screen to make sure that my presentation is crisp and clear, that would be great. And also I see Courtney and Ryan on video, so just want to say hi. I know both of them. Thank you for joining. All right, so Marielle, I think you're going to be asking the questions.
Yes. So, oh my gosh, I love that you have these gifts here. Okay, so do you have any tips for creating stability and setting expectations when the future of work is unclear?
Yes. So one of the most important things you can do as a leader is to create structure and stability. So whoever asked this question, it's great that you are already thinking about this. So the first thing I'd recommend is to share what your company's policy is for work, even if you're unsure whether this is going to be your forever policy. So I think it's more than okay to say, we plan on being remote until this date, and then, we'll provide another update when it gets closer. And for those of you who are coming up with your strategy or what your plan is for the future, I would recommend working with other leaders at your company to start chipping away at the various aspects of whatever work model you choose, because there's going to be a lot to it if you're doing it well. So I think HR teams, executive teams, and task force teams across functions are typically the most common. And then of course you'll want to get input from multiple people and to have people you can bounce ideas off of. And then, of course, you'll want to make sure leadership is on board too to help socialize and implement whatever policies you end up coming up with.
And I'd just love to hear your feedback on, as we are moving into another phase of this global pandemic and the future of work, and the uncertainty that is just surrounding us from all sides. What do you hope comes with this new way of working personally?
I think hybrid and remote work, like I love that it's going to give people just more control over their lives and to kind of set up their life how they want it to be. So, previously I would maybe, try to work out in the morning or work out after work, and I would be so tired either way, early or late. And now that I'm working from home and I have more flexibility, I typically work out in the afternoon, and it kind of gives me that extra, burst of energy to complete my day. So just, whether people have kids or family that they're, dealing with and having to juggle, like being able to just have more flexibility with that, I think is going to be really key. And of course, this past year was not super natural with remote work. We were all, shelter in place, and we didn't have the outlets that we might normally have outside of work. But I think, hopefully, soon as things get better, we'll really be experiencing the full potential of what's to come.
Yes, flexibility is key.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. And again, I'm going to remind our live callers, if you see your question come up on the screen, we want to hear from you. So, just let us know you're here. Just give me a holler. Okay, so let's move on to this next question. What should we be looking for in applicants when hiring for remote teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing I want to call out is that just because you are hiring a remote candidate doesn't mean that they need to have experience working remotely in the traditional sense. So you can look at factors like, have they been part of a team that was distributed or in different time zones where they worked at different times of the day and had to learn how to communicate with them? Do they use messaging tools and other aspects of their lives and can transfer that skill set over to a work environment? So keeping your criteria open will help you create a larger candidate pool to help you find the best talent, which is really one of the best benefits to remote work. And beyond that, I'd say that one of the top skills you want to hire for is communication. So this was already really, really important before 2020, but I would say it's even more so now. So can your candidate share their ideas clearly, whether written or over video? Do they know how to bring up problems calmly and clearly? Do they know how to share updates and keep their manager up to date on progress? So communication is going to be really critical to ensuring that your potential hire is going to be successful in a remote setup.
I love that you're highlighting that. So I often host the virtual career fairs, some virtual career fairs here at Power to Fly, because we usually
Mhm.
have a lot of companies that are looking to hire, hybrid or remote or in office, depending on what they are, what their preferences are. And we get a lot of questions about, first time folks who are going to remote teams,
Mhm.
or how to transition into working hybrid. And a lot of the feedback that we're getting from companies. I mean, I've been on the call with Dell, with American Express,
Mhm.
with these bigger companies and also startup companies as well. And they say exactly what you're saying. Just be able to communicate effectively. Be able to respect the flexibility as well, right? And also to set your boundaries so that you don't burn out really quickly, because it's hard to have that, take that distance. We were chit chatting behind the scenes talking about, video fatigue and digital
Mhm.
fatigue. So I would actually love to hear if you have any tips personally on how to overcome digital fatigue or video fatigue.
Yeah, so actually my previous Power to Fly chat and learn was all about how to stand out on video, and there's some tips that I share pretty often about how to keep videos more engaging. So I would encourage you all to go look at those if you're curious to improve your video skills. But I would say, it's okay to, have your one-on-one be a phone call, for example. So it doesn't always have to be video, especially if you know the person already and you kind of have that relationship. You don't always need to be seeing their face. I've heard from people that taking phone calls or walking phone calls is a really nice way to break up the day. And then, excuse me, when you do choose to do video, it really, I think try to go beyond kind of the minimum. So yes, turning on your video and screen sharing has been what we've seen a lot of, over the past year and a half. But things like Prezi Video, where you can bring your visuals on screen with you and kind of engage with your content, is going to just add that extra layer and kind of up level you and get rid of that video fatigue that we had talked about earlier.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. So let's go on to the next question here. All right. So, how can I get a hold of stakeholders remotely if they don't respond to the emails, IMs, or phone calls on time? Setting up an escalation plan in advance doesn't help if I'm the only person following it.
Yes, that's a great question, and I'm sorry that you're this person, whoever asked it, is having this trouble. I can imagine it can be very frustrating. So I'm going to assume this question is about internal stakeholders. So I'll just answer with that assumption. So the first thing I do is ask this person whether they gave a heads up to their teammates that there might be something urgent that you're planning on sending their way. So if you haven't done this, I think this would probably be the simplest solution, and I would make sure to communicate this to them clearly and get their okay that they will be available at that time. But if these are one-off events that you can't really plan ahead for, I would probably escalate this issue to your manager to figure out a system that can address this, and really make it clear why your teammates not being responsive is an issue and how it might be hurting team or company goals. So I think in instances like these, like having the manager behind you to create a policy and then actually enforce it is going really to be what's most effective. And another thing that I would think about that could be helpful is to create a master doc of everyone's working hours. So I know at Atlassian they do this, and it works pretty well. And maybe for you, you might have everyone's working hours and then maybe like a backfill for each person when they're not online. So that could be another alternative as well.
Awesome. Yes, that accountability piece, it's kind of tricky, right, to
It
maneuver,
is,
especially
yeah,
as we're figuring out how to work more online, and just to, really enhance that communication piece,
exactly. Yeah.
and to hold each other accountable, right? I love this question is like, it doesn't work if I'm the only person following it. Absolutely. I would love to know if anyone on the call has had any experience with this, if they have found any tips or tricks of their own that work. I see that Julia has something to say here. They write,
Mhm.
in my experience, I've seen that lack of prompt response can be a lack of alignment on the
Mm.
priority of a project, assuming this is a project-based scenario. Would you like to comment on that, Lorraine?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally a reasonable assumption, and I think if that is something that you suspect is happening, again, like aligning with your manager, calling out what you think might be the issue, or that there might be a misalignment, is going to be really key to kind of top trickling down to make sure everyone is on the same page and you're getting kind of that support that you need.
And I just want to also ask our live callers, what tools do you all use for communication, so that, there is that accountability piece and make, when things need to be escalated, you find that it actually works using, X app. I don't want to share my preferences first. I want to hear from
Yeah,
you
yeah.
all. So let's see. Can you all drop that in the chat box? Which, what support do you all use for communication so that we can see, how many folks on the call are using the same, or maybe there's a new one we can come to learn
Hmm.
now. Lorraine, how about you? What do you like to use? I know Google Docs and all that, but what do you like to use?
Yeah, so for messaging, we use Slack. And Prezi actually doesn't use email too much, but I kind of still like email sometimes for certain things. But yeah, Slack would be the main way that we kind of get in touch with each other. I like to avoid texting or like getting involved with anyone's personal phone number. I think that's their personal thing, and they shouldn't, when they get a text, they shouldn't be like, oh my gosh, is this from work? So I keep it to Slack.
Awesome. We've got folks dropping in the chat box. Thank you all. Jesse writes, we use Slack a lot, but it's
Hmm.
honestly hard to keep track of when there's so many channels, messages, and emails.
Yeah.
Cool. Lorraine, do you have any tips on that? How to just make sure you're not getting lost in the channels?
I do actually, yeah. So, something interesting that happened to me recently is there's a contractor on my team, and he wasn't responding to certain Slack messages, and I, wasn't sure what was going on. Took 10-15 minutes to sit down with him and realize that he didn't actually know a lot of the functionality of Slack. So he didn't know that he could mute rooms. He didn't know that there was a threads section or a mention section. And so I think having some sort of like guidebook, or just sitting down with any new hire to teach them about the tools is really important, just because we sometimes assume like, oh, of course we know it, like someone else is going to know it too, but this isn't the case. And so if you can kind of apply this to different tools at your work, your employees are just going to become a lot more productive and not be overwhelmed by these tools. And hopefully they become something that helps them versus hinders them in their workflow.
Absolutely. And every day, more and more content, how-to tips and tricks are
Hmm.
being posted on YouTube. So I would encourage people just to take that initiative on their own, watch a
Yeah,
2-minute
it's free
video on
resource.
like tips and tricks on Slack, for example, because I know that these apps are coming up with new ways to, just be more seamless. So just to be ahead of that, so that, for example, Lorraine doesn't have to say, "Hey, are you okay?"
Yeah.
You can figure it out on your own and have that own accountability. That's just a tip of mine that I would throw out to that person. We have more people writing in the chat. They use email and Teams,
Yeah,
Slack and
Teams is a big one.
Airtable and Google Meet. Another
Hmm.
person, email and Teams. Ryan says, I think Slack is actually less intuitive than it appears. Interesting. I'd love to
Yeah.
hear people, debate on that. And Julia writes, as an employee in a learning and development focused role, I second that. Okay, cool. So yeah, we've got, this is why I didn't want to say, I use this. What do you all use? I
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to see
yeah.
what you all use just to not have that preference start us out on the conversation.
Hmm.
So thank you for that. Anyone else want to share, any tips and tricks before we move on to the next question? All right. All right. So let's move on to the next question.
Okay.
I'm really loving the engagement in the chat box, so I appreciate everyone. All right. So are there strategies I can use to optimize meetings and follow up?
Yes, there are literally so many, but I'm going to share just four of my tips with you all right now. So um, the first one is to include an agenda. So have a plan for what you want to talk about, and always make sure you have a stated goal or outcome for the meeting to keep everyone focused. And I actually had a coworker when I was at LinkedIn who would literally say at the beginning of each meeting, this meeting will be a success if. And it, sounded kind of funny. The phrasing was, not super natural, and I hadn't heard it from anyone else, but it was super effective because, we knew what the goal of the meeting was and what we were trying to reach by the end versus just talking and going off track. So that would be my first tip. The second would be to evaluate the meeting. So is it something that you can cancel entirely or do async to save time? If you can't come up with an agenda and goal that requires other people to participate because all you're doing is sharing out a project update, that's likely an indicator that you can save everyone some time and send an async video instead. And the third tip I have would be to document. So always have someone assigned to document so that you can track all the calls to action and, like we mentioned before, hold people accountable. So I like to recommend rotating between team members to do this, especially if it's a regularly occurring meeting. And documenting is going to be even more important in a hybrid or remote work setting because people are, not always going to make the meetings and they're working at different times and have, different things going on in their lives. And the last tip is to include deadlines. So whenever I ask anyone to do anything, I always give them a due date. And then I ask them, I'm not pushing it on them. I ask if that deadline works for them. And this way you aren't having to, waste time checking in at an arbitrary date when they thought they had a whole other week to work on a project. So there's also, again, that added level of accountability when someone agrees and says that, yes, they can get something back to you, by a certain date. And that also helps build trust within colleagues. And then, like I mentioned before, so many other tips I could share. Prezi is actually coming out with an ebook this summer, specifically around hybrid meetings, where we got to interview tons of hybrid companies and experts. So just keep an eye out for that if you're interested in learning more. And you can follow me on LinkedIn to know when we make that live, because I will definitely be posting about it.
Awesome. I love the accountability piece with like make sure you rotate so that everyone can understand and for me that creates empathy and as you know I love speaking about emotional intelligence and empathy is a very important pillar in emotional intelligence. So
Yeah.
if you have one person documenting the whole time, everyone might take it for granted, right? And then that
Yeah,
person
for
is on
sure.
vacation and maybe they lose, drop the ball. So I love that it's a way to also see how other people organize what their talents are in organization and communication
Yeah.
and just to come together as a team. So I really love that you highlighted that.
Mhm.
Jesse comments that we use Gong for this and it uses keywords to suggest next steps or ownership for both internal and external calls. Wow,
Oh,
that's nice.
interesting. Okay, I'll have to check that out. Thank you.
Always something new on the map these days, right? Thank you, Jesse, for dropping that in the chat box. All right, let's move on to the next question here. Okay, so again, I'm going to remind folks, if you see your question coming up, we want to know that you're here. So just you can let me know that in the chat box by saying that's my question. And if it's not your question and you want to dive in deep, hop off mute and we'd love to hear from you. Okay, so we are working in a hybrid model, but
Mhm.
I'm having trouble making sure our remote folks feel connected and valued in ways that seem to happen more organically when dealing with our in-office staff. Do you have
Mhm.
any suggestions?
Yeah, so I would first evaluate why you think there might be this imbalance. So, look into whether you're doing things maybe unconsciously, like giving praise and kudos to the in-person colleagues, like in passing, or maybe you're planning team activities for in-office folks and leaving your remote colleagues out of it because they're not there. So I think first step, just get a feel for why one group might be feeling better or worse. That'll be a good starting point. And then I would start making some changes based on what you find out. So team bonding activities should try to be, virtual as much as possible, again, to make sure everyone feels included and equal. If you're going to do something in person, make sure that your remote colleagues have the same budget to do something on their own, maybe amongst themselves as well. But in general, though, I would err on the side of trying to keep things virtual when it comes to any sort of activity, just to make colleagues feel valued and connected in the same ways. So at Prezi, we give kudos at our virtual marketing meetings, and then we also do a fun team bonding activity 2 times a month over video. And then we use, I don't know if any of you have heard of this tool called Small Improvements that allows you to submit kudos for anyone at the company. So these are just a few examples you could try to ensure that everyone feels valued and connected equally. And again, this is all, happening over virtual.
And I'm just curious to know what have been some of your favorite team activities that you say you do a couple times a month at Prezi?
Yeah, so we started a few months ago. So one that we just did was we got separated into breakout rooms, and we had to find, there was like 3 categories, like find the most unique thing that you all have in common, find the most unique thing you all have in common for like a specific period of life, like in high school or something. Um, and find the most common thing you have that doesn't have to do with like a physical place or something else. But that was good to just like bring up random stories from our lives that we've had. We did a virtual drawing game that my team planned that was really fun. And that was also, I think, something, to keep in mind is that was a good game for both introverts and extroverts. So as you are thinking of bonding activities, it's not just in-person and virtual, it's also extrovert, introvert as well. Yeah, and I would say those are the 2 most recent ones that went over very well.
Awesome. I love that, to find the commonalities and build bridges, right? Because I know when we
Mhm.
have the screen in front of us, it's kind of like, okay, well, how do I mean, I see you from the shoulders up every
Yeah.
day. Oh, we used to play clarinet in high school. Me too. Okay, then we
Mhm.
can talk about music a little more and just kind of get
Yeah.
out of the work setting and get more into, just connecting in a different way. So that's really nice. I want to see if anyone on the call has any, um, team activities that they have found really fruitful and helpful. I would love to just share that, also flag that, and highlight that, if you drop that in the chat box. So let us know if you have any virtual or in-person, team building activities that you prefer, so that we can just share it with everyone now, and maybe,
Yeah, I'm
maybe it's
always
someone's
looking
new jam.
for new ones. Yeah, so please add them to the chat.
Awesome. Okay, so as you all are thinking of that and dropping that in the chat box, let's move to the next question.
Okay.
All right. Oh, I love this. I love this gift. These are great gifts, by the way.
It was so random that it showed up, but I was like, this is the one.
This is the one. Yes. Okay, so let's move on to this question. Some of my coworkers love to set up calls to sort out issues that can be resolved via Slack. But I find that the calls break up my workday often and aren't very productive for how long they last. How do I respectfully push back to reclaim my workday?
Yeah, so this is such a great question, and I'm sure many people are going through something similar. So the first thing I would suggest is to create something called a README and distribute it to your teammates to help hopefully resolve this issue. So for those of you who aren't familiar, a README allows you to share anything you want about your working style, your communication preferences, your management style, etc. Mine personally is about how I manage. But I also have a teammate who, talks about how she likes to communicate and receive feedback and all that other good stuff. So I personally think that READMEs are something that are really useful for teams to create. So you can all learn a little bit more about each other's working styles and end up, working more productively. So, for this person who asked the question, I'd maybe even bring it up as an idea for a team activity that you can all do together. And whoever asked this question, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. If you want to see an example of a README, I can send you mine. And another thing I would try to do, is use an app called Clockwise and ask your coworkers to join too. So great tool. What it does is it automatically updates your meeting times with other people who also use Clockwise so that your meetings are grouped together and then optimized for both parties. So you end up getting left with blocks of no meeting time to get actual work done, and what they call that is focus time. So if colleagues see on your calendar that you have focus time on your calendar, they'll know that this should be uninterrupted meeting time. And if you sync it to Slack, it shows up there as well. So I love this tool. I think it's really great. And I would recommend you check it out if you aren't familiar with it.
Awesome. I love that idea. That's great. And yes, we would love to check out the way that you are, working through that with your team. So, everyone, make sure that you connect with Lorraine on LinkedIn and you can have access to that. Okay, so Jesse has, just shared in the chat box. We haven't done this at my company, but a friend works at a company, that is 100% virtual.
Mhm.
Her boss ends every meeting 5 to 10 minutes early and gives the team a thought starter that isn't work related. For example, tell us about a piece of art in your home. What's the best thing you purchased during the pandemic, etc. And she has really enjoyed that opportunity to have dedicated time to get to know her colleagues beyond their roles. Awesome. That's a great idea. Would you like to comment on that, Lorraine?
Yeah, so actually I think one of the other questions later kind of touches on that, but I do something similar for my team meetings. We call it question of the week, and it comes at the start of the meeting, and we just pick one person each week to choose a random question to ask the other teammates, and then we just go around answering it, and then they nominate someone for the following week. So totally agree, like it's a really good way just to very low commitment way to kind of get to know each other a little bit more, and to just I was getting very tired of the how was your weekend question, especially with shelter in place. So this was a really nice way to kind of break from that, and a very light touch way to bond with your team each week.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for dropping that in the chat box, Jesse. And just if anyone else has any tips or activities that they have enjoyed, whether they have practiced it themselves or they see their friends doing it, please let us know in the chat box so that we can raise that to our awareness. All right, let's move on to the next question here. Okay, so how can we build chemistry with a team when none of us have ever met in person?
Yes, so I think there are many ways you can do this, and I think we've already shared some really great ideas. But I would just call out again that remote is definitely not a barrier at all to creating really great relationships. So I have ideas for both simpler things you can do and more elaborate things. So I actually just touched on this. The question of the week is something simple we do to get to know one another at the start of each meeting. Another idea I've heard is, everyone changes their background to a movie scene, and then you kind of, you take turns guessing. So that's another really light touch way to kind of get to know each other and to talk about things that you might have in common. So for question of the week, just to give you all some inspiration, a few of my favorite questions have been, if you could do any sport in the Summer Olympics, which would it be? What color would you use to describe yourself? And what reality TV show would you be on? So very, it's very a big variety of questions there, and it can be work related or personal, but most people have chosen the personal route so far, but I think you could do either. And if you're looking to do a more elaborate activity, there are tons of companies doing virtual team building games with different price points. So there are escape rooms, drawing games, cooking classes. I think I would just remember that it's definitely possible for all of you to build team chemistry. It might not be overnight, but it will happen if you put in the time and effort and have people on your team who do want to get to know each other.
Great advice. I'm loving all the gems that you're dropping. Okay, I'm going to flag something that Julia has written in the chat box. They write, our team does a remarkable meeting every week where we share one thing we've done in the past week that makes us remarkable. That's great. Sometimes they are work related, but we also hear things like, I am remarkable because I made a vegan beef Wellington and everyone loved it.
Nice. It is
Would you like to
impressive.
comment? Yeah. Great. Yes, I love the prompts. I'm a fan of writing,
Mhm.
and I used to love writing prompts. I was one of those, like, English nerds, I guess, and
Yeah.
advanced English. Like, okay, let's just bring up all the prompts and dive in deep there. And I love that we can put that into, like, a team building setting where it's like, okay,
Mhm.
let's really, like, how do you tackle sexism in the workplace, or racism in the
Yeah.
workplace, or equity, and these kind of
Mhm.
open-ended prompts that maybe
Yeah.
you think have nothing to do with that might bring back some conversations to, okay, actually, I think that, we can read this book to understand more. I love what Lorraine brought up in our last meeting
Mhm.
about, this character that really inspired her to, I don't know, share her
Mhm.
story. And so that we can become better storytellers, maybe we can read this
Mhm.
short book. And I
Yeah.
find that, it's endless from there, just to be creative with how to build chemistry. I think that recently someone mentioned the fact that work can be intimate, right?
Mhm.
We historically speaking, you have to check everything at the door and be very straight
Yeah. Yeah.
at work. But now we're like, well, that means I can't bring my full self to work,
Mhm.
and actually that means I have to withhold some things, and I can't do my best work. So, building chemistry and finding that intimacy, by being emotionally intelligent, being
Mhm.
self-aware, practicing empathy. I really think that,
Mhm.
that will hopefully change the game, the way that we work in the future.
Yeah, and Mariella, the point you made earlier about anytime you can get a group together to solve a specific problem, I think that's like a really great way to to bring people together. And if it's a meaningful question, like even better.
Absolutely. All right. Julia also writes, our team also does a book club once a year where we nominate and then vote on a book to read as a group. That's great. I love
Nice,
that.
that's great. Yeah.
All right, let's move to the next question here. Okay, so I'm looking for ways to build trust in my team, but it's hard because some are remote and some are on site. Do I need to use different methods for each group?
So I think when it comes to trust, you should use the same method for both. So I don't know if you've heard of the concept called Swift trust, but basically what it means is that you assume trust first and then you verify it through someone's actions. So before the pandemic, in the office, we did the opposite of this. So we would base trust based on what we saw. So, were they in the office early? Did they stay late? Were they on time to meetings? How did they appear for meetings? Things like that. But for both in person and remote, we need to apply Swift trust with everyone. So I think it's always a good idea to start from a place of assuming best intention and then support it with your team's actions afterwards. And I think your team will always perform better and feel more empowered if they feel like you trust them.
And I mean, this is a great question just to round out all of the suggestions that you've mentioned before, because
Mhm.
when you genuinely ask someone, not just how was their weekend, because that's the thing to ask in a meeting, but you
Mhm.
have an intentional question just to get that deeper connection. I think that starts to build trust, and then the accountability piece,
Mhm.
not micromanaging, like really being like, we want to succeed, we want to get through this project. Let's make sure
Yeah.
that we meet these due dates, also builds trust, and just the genuine, like, I want to know who you are outside of this project. I think that
Mhm.
can also build trust. So you've mentioned this along the way, so this is a great question just to round that out.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and and I would just love to know, anyone on the call, have you all found anything helpful to gain trust, especially maybe when trust has been broken, let's say, due
That's a hard
to,
one.
I
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah.
right, just due to whatever
Yeah.
reason. But how do you rebuild trust also? Lorraine, I would actually like to ask you, how do you rebuild trust, with, when something might happen to kind of make you question the other person's trust?
Yeah. I would say, thankfully there hasn't been like a huge, breach of trust during my career, but little things here and there can kind of add up. And I think going back to that example I gave earlier with the deadlines, so I think deadlines are a really simple way to build trust, but if someone doesn't follow that, it's also a simple, easy way to kind of lose that trust. And so I've had people who say like, yes, I'll get it to you by this time, and they miss it. I follow up. They say, okay, I'll get it to you by this date. They miss it. I follow up again. So I think in those instances, I just am like, I'm just very upfront with them, and I say, you've missed the past, few deadlines. Is there anything I can do to help? Like, what, do you need more time? Like, are you struggling with something about it? So just trying to understand where they're coming from. And I think acknowledging and mentioning that it is a trust thing, does kind of switch something in people's brains where they realize like, oh, I do need to commit to this if I'm saying I'm going to commit to this. And so, yeah, I think just being direct and honest, and not attacking them, but just trying to understand why something isn't sort of working out and why they aren't keeping to their word, is a good approach for that.
You know what? And I agree. Thank you for sharing that. Because as I begin to, I mean, as we crack open all of these really, complex,
Mhm.
topics here at Power to Fly, with people who might be going through, let's say, something personal at home.
Yeah,
I mean, there are
yeah.
so many things that can come up, and that, of course, affects your work.
Hmm.
If you don't have the boundaries in place, or, all of us have our ups and downs.
Sure.
So, maybe something really intense is going on at home, and you're not able to share that, with your team, but then you can't, follow up on the deadlines, as Lorraine said.
Hmm.
And I love your approach to checking in and saying, how can I support you? Is everything okay? Because that might open a door to, creating more trust, more
Yeah,
more
yeah, yeah.
intimacy in that situation, where you can story tell and exchange encouragement, and
Mhm.
maybe some resources as well. So I love that open-ended question, instead of just fighting back like, hey,
Yeah,
you're X, Y,
that's
and
my
Z,
thing.
and
Yeah.
exactly, having that open-ended question, so that maybe something else comes to the forefront.
Yeah, and I would say again, like it goes back to the assuming best intentions. Like this person is, uh, you know, likely not trying to make you angry or to purposefully, miss deadlines. So you just keep that in mind. It just really reframes kind of how you approach these sorts of issues.
Awesome. So actually, just to go circle back here, for someone who is just starting out working remote, let's say, and they're not just they can't have, they don't have everything in their grasp, because there's
Mhm.
so many things that we have to learn in order to do our best when working, on hybrid teams or remotely.
Mhm.
How can that person express that they need, a little more grace or time, so that they can build, trust between team members, and not feel like they're dropping the ball?
Yeah, so hopefully whoever this person is, they will have a supportive manager where they work. So for anyone looking for a new job and who's fairly new to the market, a good manager is so key to having a really wonderful work experience. So I think talking to your manager, asking about prioritization, that's a very hard skill to figure out, but I think once you get it down, it helps you so much in terms of time management, just figuring out, just yeah, again, how to prioritize your work. So just yeah, turning to your manager, I think is useful. I think also trying to seek out someone within the company who's not your manager. So like a mentor at the company who you can kind of turn to for those questions where you might not necessarily feel comfortable asking your manager. So at Prezi, we have a buddy system. And so anytime someone new joins, we link them up with someone else at the company, and that can be their person who they ask, all their random questions to without feeling the need like they're bothering their manager. So, before like asking about like vacation time, or like how do you manage like these stakeholders, or how do you organize your day? And I think just like being able to learn from another person at the company and kind of staying close and having someone who's keeping an eye out for you, I think is going to be another really helpful tactic.
I love that mentorship, seeking mentorship within the company or outside of the company. I love that.
Both, yeah.
Great. Okay, so let's move on to the next question here. I just want to remind our live callers, if anyone wants to hop off mute, you're free to do that at any point, or continue writing in the chat box. I'm loving the engagement there, so keep it up. All right, so this question reads, is there an ideal duration for a virtual team meeting? This is the big question mark, isn't it? Would making them would making the meetings more interactive help keep participants attentive and engaged? How to make virtual meetings even more engaging than in-person ones?
Yes, so there is no ideal time, but I think you will find that if you make a meeting longer, there will magically be enough content to take up the whole time. So I recommend keeping your meetings as short as possible but you can still get everything done in them. So to answer the other part of your question, yes, I think adding any sort of interactivity or activity that requires two-way engagement from meeting participants should be a requirement of meetings. If it's just you talking to your audience, like I mentioned before, that project update, there's no reason really to have a meeting, and you can send that as an async video and save everyone some time. And there's a lot of things that you can do with virtual for meetings that you can't do for in-person. So for example, you see I'm using Prezi Video here. I'm using fun visuals that I can point to and engage with in a way that wouldn't be as seamless in person. And I actually just wanted to call out really quick. We have this new feature here that allows your participants to respond on screen in real time with their reactions or questions. So I think Channing here was asking people how their weekend was. And so Stefan says he harvested some chives. So this is another way to kind of, help encourage people to participate and have everyone involved versus just kind of that one loud person in the room or over video. So Prezi Video or tools like Slido or platforms like Hopin can also be used for more interactive experiences too. So I would do some research into those to figure out ways that you can up-level your meetings.
That's great. I love this new feature.
Yeah,
That's
and it's
great.
available on Zoom, so you can use it.
Awesome. So let's see. I wanted to say, actually, I have found it helpful to put like a little intermission. Maybe this is because I come from the arts and theater background. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
everyone needs a break to just like look at the sky, drink some water,
yeah.
dance around a little bit. So especially, if you're a manager or if you have the authority to set up the meeting, I definitely recommend putting like a little, 2-minute or 5-minute break. You can call it a dance break, you can call it a water break, you can call it an eco break, whatever you want. But I think that in my experience, that brings us back with fresh ideas, especially if you've been in back-to-back meetings, just to have that little intermission there.
Yeah, I love that. And I think whenever you can, if you're scheduling a meeting, if you can end it, even just 5 minutes earlier, I think it makes a big difference for everyone, especially Mariella, as you said, when you have back to back to back.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that I learned this, I don't know who coined it, but I've started to say it in my language as well. Just, I'm giving you 5 minutes back. I'm giving us 5 minutes back, kind of like, let's end the time and then you have 5 minutes as a gift, and time is of the essence, and it's so important. So you will definitely gain trust there if you can, if you
Yes,
can
yes,
give people time back.
definitely.
All right, let's move on to the next question here. All right. This is a really interesting question. I'm curious to see what your feedback is here. So let's talk about dress code post, going back into the on-site here. So do you anticipate conflicts over dress code with employees working in a hybrid arrangement? Many employees dress differently post-quarantine than they did when working in the office every day. Is there an ideal compromise here, or should we require a return to the pre-COVID dress code?
Okay, great question. So I think this is Ryan's question. So thank you, Ryan, for the question. So I personally don't envision too many dress code conflicts. So even before the pandemic, many more, typically like formal organizations like banks were already relaxing their dress codes. So if anything, I think there might be fewer conflicts moving forward because everyone has seen each other in their homes and they understand that less formal clothes are going to be more comfortable to be in, all day, and we can still do good work even when we're not dressed up. I know when I personally go back into the office, I'll probably do a mix. So if I have an important meeting, of course, it always looks, you look better when you're dressed up. But if it's just, a day where I have, meetings with internal teammates, like I'll just probably still be pretty casual. But what do you think, Mariella?
I have acquired a new style that's called comfortably cool. I don't know if y'all feel me on that, but like how can I be cozy, comfortable, but
Yeah.
still, show the part of myself that I want to show. So
Mhm.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, it's always been an interesting conversation of how to show up at work, like
Mhm.
how you present yourself. And I remember when the big like tattoo debate was on the table, and it's like, it's so
Sure. Yeah.
unprofessional. And now it's like,
Yeah.
okay, now it's not even it's not questioned. So
Mhm.
I agree with you, Lorraine. I think that actually there'll be um will be more flexible, as with
Mhm.
everything that we have,
Yeah,
so
I hope so. Yeah.
maybe teams will say like, let's have a pajama day, or let's have an ugly sweater day, or something like that instead, just to shake it up and keep things interesting. Great question, Ryan. Thank you for submitting that. All right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Ryan. I want to know, what do you want? What do you want? How do you want to return back to work? Do you want to, go all dressed to the nines? Where are you on the spectrum?
I think I'll probably, like, when I go into the office, I'll always dress business casual, because I feel comfortable that way. But I know, like, some people in my company, the whole, like, working from home, sometimes, they like don't wear shoes or they don't wear pants. So it's just, obviously no one's gonna. I mean, I hope no one shows up to work without pants on. But it's just to me, it's very interesting because I think I'll probably dress the same as I did, always. But I think, it'll be interesting seeing how other people change their behavior.
Yeah, and I think actually, yeah, like comfortable clothes, I realize like I do better work when I'm comfortable. And I think that's probably the case with most people. So I would hope, yeah, that we can find a mix and we don't have to all be, super, super suited up and things like that for work moving forward if it's not something that we want to do.
That's so interesting. I think I do better at work when I'm like have nice clothes on me.
Are you
Like not
comfortable though in the
necessarily a
nice clothes?
tuxedo, but
Yeah,
like
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but like, and it's different obviously, I think um traditional office wear for males is more, I guess, workable in some senses than traditional office wear females, in some ways. So it might be different that way. But actually, I think I do better work when I like dressed up. I think for me, I guess if I look good in the mirror, then I feel
Hmm.
good and then I do good work. Maybe it's all in my head. I don't know.
No, I think that's like a very real thing for sure.
I agree. I agree. Like there are sometimes when I'm like, I cannot wear sweatpants anymore. I need to like
Yeah.
put some jeans on so I can get more work done. I don't know. The jeans help me get more work done in that case. So yes, to your point, Ryan, be you so that you can be your best self. If that's wearing, dress to the nines attire, or if that's, wearing your casually cool attire, go for it. Awesome. I love that. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. And I also want to just flag, we've got about 10 minutes left. So if you have not had a chance to hop off mute or write in the chat box, you've got 10 minutes left to shine. We would love to hear from you. So feel free. Until then, as you all are thinking about, should I do it, should I not? I'm going to read this question here. So I've recently been promoted into management. Congratulations. But I'm having trouble switching hats since I still work with a lot of the same people from my previous role. Do you have any tips to make them see me differently? Or should I be focusing on my own presentation and leadership style?
Hmm. So yeah, I'll plus one that, Mariella. Congratulations on the promotion. So I think there are a few things that you can do to further cement your role as manager in their eyes. So the first thing I would say is you should meet with each teammate and pretend that you're new to the team. So ask them about their day to day, what their working style is. I mentioned the README before. Maybe you ask everyone to create their own README, how they like to communicate, how they like to receive feedback and praise, all these sorts of questions that are important to know when you're a manager. And these are all things I look to learn when there's someone new on my team, because it's going to help me manage them in a way that's best for both of us. Now, one of the big questions that you can ask that will make the delineation clear with you being a manager now is asking about existing processes and meetings. So by asking what's working well and what can be changed or improved on, and then start making those changes. And then, as you mentioned, your executive presence and your presentation and leadership style will also play a role. So don't just be a talking head to your team making announcements. It's important to take that extra step to find ways to engage them and to make sure your meetings are productive and a good use of everyone's time. Whether you're using more engaging visuals or finding ways to make sure that everyone has a voice, or maybe, finding ways to celebrate your team. But I think, what it really comes down to is just the main thing to remember is that managing well is really about people management and getting rid of the roadblocks and ensuring that your team is working on fun and interesting challenges that help them grow in their career. So you'd be surprised how many managers don't do this. So if you focus on that, that's already a great first step. And yeah, just follow, some of those tips I mentioned earlier. Try to make positive changes with processes and helping make, their work and their lives easier. And I think you'll be well on your way to, shifting that perception.
Absolutely. And I know that must be challenging to switch hats while still working with the same folks so you can have that authority. But I just want to remind this person, you have been promoted for a reason. So trust in yourself, and people clearly want to hear what you have to say. So, lean back on that for sure. Lean into that, I should say. And also, I personally, the empathy piece, right? How would you want someone to approach you if you were, on the same level, and then now, they are now managing you? How would you want that to be handled? And just practice a little bit of empathy there. Maybe it's, making sure that, every Monday I do this with this person because whatever, setting up your own system based on how you want to feel and the solution that you want to reach. So I encourage you to practice some empathy there as you switch hats. All right, let's move on to the next question. All right, with our remote teams, we've seen that asynchronous communication, particularly over Slack, that tone and feedback can easily be misinterpreted. How should we tackle that disconnect when we don't have time to jump on a quick call or 8 quick calls, let's say, per day to hash things out?
Yeah, so another really great question. So the solution for this, I would recommend async communications using video. And actually, great timing, just drafted an article that touched on this, and it's exactly like you said, tone and message are more likely to get lost when you're writing. So with video, it's less likely you're going to misinterpret what they say. And it's also just a really nice way to stay connected to your colleagues when they can see your face and your body language when you speak. And with async video, you can do things like I'm doing now, where you have visuals that you can reference as you're talking versus, you write a long paragraph and then you attach a screenshot and the viewer has to kind of process the two things separately. So I think video overall is just going to be a lot more of a seamless experience. And yeah, hopefully, give it a try and hopefully it helps. And I'd be curious, feel free to follow up with me on LinkedIn and let me know. But I think async video sounds like the solution for you.
Awesome. And I just want to remind folks that if you're joining us live, you will get a rewatch email with the links to the resources that Lorraine is mentioning, because I know she's giving lots of tips and lots of resources to fall back on. So be looking out for that. And if you are not live here with us and you're rewatching this, I encourage you to connect with Lorraine on LinkedIn and just message her there. Let her know that you heard her presenting in this conversation with Power to Fly, and I'm sure she will be happy to send you the resources there. All right, so we have about 5 minutes left. So if it's okay with you, I would like to just turn it over to you to have the last words, food for thought, remind us of how we can connect with you, any new things that you want to share with us, things like that, to take this time to be intentional about that.
Yes, definitely. So for everyone in the audience today, first of all, thank you again for attending and sticking with me through this whole hour. So for anyone who's interested in trying Prezi Video, I would like to offer you all a little gift, a 6-month premium upgrade, which means you can do things like use presenter notes and record in high def. So you just need to fill out this link here. That's prezi.com/attendee upgrade if you're interested in this 6-month upgrade, and we'll send you some additional resources as well to help you get started. And the other thing I'd like to say is I'd love for all of you to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on Twitter and Instagram. If you have a question that didn't get answered, feel free to just send it to me there and I'll make sure I get back to you. And just, big thank you again for everyone who joined today and submitted your questions. The fact that you're all here wanting to learn how to be the best manager for your teams already shows how much you care, which I really believe is, one of the key factors to being a great manager. So kudos to all of you. And I really look forward to connecting.
Awesome. And just on a personal note, because I love that you're sharing the goodies that Prezi is, opening up for our live listeners. So thank you so much. Why did you join Prezi, and what do you like about working at Prezi?
So actually, one of the reasons I joined Prezi is because I wanted to manage and to do it in an official capacity. And unfortunately, just the structure at LinkedIn, there wasn't an opportunity there for that. So, I had the chance to build my own team. As I mentioned before, I was the first editorial hire. Prezi's that perfect size where it's not too small, but not too big. So you get the resources and support you need, but it's still a startup. So I can run with my ideas and just experiment with a lot of different ideas that I have. And so, yeah, that's the main reason I joined. And then of course, I'm at LinkedIn, I was, steep in the business world among business professionals. Prezi is quite similar. They have a very big business and education audience. And so, to be able to build a tool for virtual presenting and collaboration and to be part of that, and especially, in this world now that we're in, is really meaningful to be able to help people just be better at their jobs.
Absolutely. Sorry to put you on the spot there, but I knew you had some good stuff to share. And I wanted, just for folks who might not be aware of Prezi and just your influence there, I just wanted to give you a chance to share why you work there. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
So we've
Lorraine's
got
a big deal at Prezi.
Say it again, Ryan.
Oh, I was just joking. I said Lorraine's a big deal at Prezi.
I have no doubt about that.
Oh.
I get to speak with her, not as frequently as I would like through these presentations here, and I always enjoy our virtual time. So I know whoever has you as a manager, good.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
I can't sing your praises enough. It's always a pleasure to have you on here. So we've got about 3 minutes left, and someone did write something in the chat box that I'll flag before we end. So my input to the last question: define the KPIs and timeline. Having one-on-ones with each member of your per week to get an idea about the progress, challenges, and find out areas where you as a manager can provide support. Remember, at the end of the day, what's important and what matters the most. It's to get the job done properly so that you can be more successful. Thank you so much for adding that. And that's actually a great way to end this conversation. I encourage everyone to bring their best selves to the table, figure out ways that you can still bring that authenticity, that chemistry to work as you begin to work hybrid or fully remote. I know that everyone, is still figuring out what they're going to do these days, but, it doesn't mean that you have to leave a part of you behind. As Lorraine has shown in this past hour, you can still bring your full self and still bring your creativity to the table and accountability as well. So I encourage everyone to connect with Lorraine on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, and we'll see you on the next Chat and Learn.
Thank you, everyone.